Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Yale 4601 or 4600 series lever set. This is a 01 function. It's a passage. So it's a 4600 LN. It's an 01, 4601 LN to be exact. It's an AU, it's the trim, and then the finish, and then all of the piece parts that are included in the box, namely the latch and strike combination. Okay, a little description: grade 2 cylindrical lever, PA. I'd imagine that means passage. So let's take a look at the item itself. It's a fairly common type of series of cylindrical units, lock sets, latch sets, available from countless manufacturers. I can't think that there's anything in particular unique about this. I've seen this identical construction from other folks. They are, in my estimation, clearly importing this from somewhere in Asia. And that doesn't mean it's bad. Just does not mean it's unique. It's a grade 2, you know, and you're going to sell boatloads of these in the right applications. It doesn't say a country of origin on the installation instructions, but I've seen this design elsewhere. It's definitely imported. And what I mean by that, it's the way that the lock goes together. It's a very belt and suspenders type approach, which I'll show you. So first, a visual tour. This is the AU or the Augusta lever, you know, probably the most common lever that exists. Returns back to within 1/2 of an inch of the face of the door. You know, typical satin chrome finish. Okay. Give you an idea of what the lever size is. Overall width of the lever looks like it's about 5 1/8. Diameter of the rows, we can kind of guesstimate here as well on the camera. Looks like it's about 3 1/4 or so. Overall projection from the face of the door looks like they're about 2 7/8. Okay. And we'll take this apart and show you how to install it, or at least how it goes together. Of course, you're going to get a latch bolt. This is, I think, the MCP234. I know it is. That's the part of the part number. MCP234. This is going to be 2 1/4 tall. It's going to be 1 1/8 wide. This is going to be 2 3/4 back set. And back set is determined from the edge of the door to the center of the cutout, even though the definition is more nuanced than just that, roughly speaking. That's the reference to back set. Whether it be a preparation from the edge of the door to the center of a hole that you've drilled, or maybe a reinforcement that you've done, it'd be proper to say, if you've ordered a Dutch door, the question might be, at what back set do you want the reinforcement for the Dutch door bolt to hold the upper leaf to the lower leaf? That would be a proper use of back set as well. It's usually measured from the, I know it to be measured from the edge to the center of something. So there you go. That's your MCP234. Now the 497 of the part number is the trusty 4 7/8 strike, as seen here. 4 7/8 tall, that means it's going to be typical for hollow metal frames. Okay. Its overall width, about 1 13/16 inches. That's not how these are measured, though. Center line of the screw hole to the edge of the lip is about 1 1/4 inches. That would be the standard dimension. Okay. And again, 4 7/8. You'll see these in hollow metal frames, really not in wood frames, although it does occur in wood frames as well. If you have a project like a hospital where you have, you know, dozens, a couple of hundred or more steel frames and steel doors, stainless doors, fiberglass doors, plastic laminate doors, you know, whatever it is, you could have a chapel. And the chapel might have a wood door and a wood frame. Probably going to use the same strike prep as you are doing elsewhere on the project. Okay. Now let's take a closer look. So really, unless you specify, you're going to end up getting a 497 strike, the typical common strike, and 2 3/4 as well. 1 1/8 wide, back to the latch bolt, is going to be typical for commercial hollow metal doors, wood doors if they're prepped that way. Projection of this latch, okay, it qualifies for 1/2 of an inch. Okay. This will work in, and back to the latch bolt. May not be able to see too much of that very successfully, but there is an image down below. Got it upside down, I think. Lower left-hand corner. Have to pull out the big hammer. Single point lock or latch. UL. It's got a capital F, which means that it's positive pressure. UL, ULC listed. Okay, that's what it all says on there. Now there are certainly other strikes that you can opt in on this lock. You know, whether or not it be something Yale can easily provide, you know. But 1¼ is the most common size. It's the Swiss Army knife of sizes of strike lip lengths, which is meant to work in almost all instances. It's almost never too long, although it can sometimes be a little shorter than 1¼ You know, maybe 1 3/16, 1 1/8. Sometimes you need it to be a little bit thicker, pardon me, longer, 1½ you know, 1 3/4 would be common as well, 2 inch. Reach out to us if you need an extended lip on that. Then there's going to be the packages of fasteners. We're going to go over all of that when we start to put the lock together. There is your universal tool. This is going to allow you to remove the lever to install the lock. This portion would be what would be called a spanner wrench. It doesn't have any function on this lock. You'll only use this end. Also in the box, you're going to get the template, which we're going to go over on the screen when we switch to the screen view. The installation instructions you're going to get as well. This is a passage function, so it's pretty easy to put together. Well, they're all easy to put together, but there's not much with a passage. And that's everything that you're going to get with this. So let's now switch to the screen view and take a closer look at the product catalog, the installation instructions, and the template. You'll know the side to take apart. It will generally have this inserted piece of cardboard that's preventing the lock from being fully put together, and that is the case. You'll end up taking that off and discarding it. The rose will come off. The mounting plate with the incorporated spring pack will come off, or the mounting rose, and then the mounting plate will come off as well. And yeah, this is a real belt and suspenders approach. What I mean by that again is you're able to screw this not only to the chassis but to through bolts as well. So you're really going to get this lock secured down how you need it to be. And we'll put that back together the way we found it. And we're going to switch to the screen view now, and let's take a closer look at all that supporting documentation. Okay, so here's the item that we are looking at. Not much to see here other than the part number, which we'll dissect that again. Augusta 4601LN function series, grade 2 cylindrical, the hand of the door, the MCP234 latch, the 497 strike. We're declaring to the factory the thickness of the door and then the finish. Okay, we have some images down below as well, which I can show you. Nice picture of the finish of 626. 626 means satin chrome over brass-based material. I'm going to say that these levers are zinc die-cast, and that these roses are very likely probably stainless steel is probably what they are, although they may be brass. Overview. Plastic insert, that's common on low-cost levers, so that's not all solid material. There's then also additional images here. Latch bolt. You can see somewhat clearly single point latch, the UL listing, which you must use. You must have a lock installed on your fire door that has this shown. It must be labeled. It must bear visual evidence that it's approved for use on a fire door. That's your 497 strike, and then of course your screws and tool pack. and then your installation instructions. Okay, so now what we'll go to next will be the product catalog, and this overview is going to show us just the series itself. The 4600LN, ideal choice for a wide variety of commercial applications where consistent quality, ease of use, and installation are required at an economical price. So a wide variety of commercial applications. These are not appropriate for the bathroom doors on retail or fast food restaurants. They are inadequate for that application. That lock needs a grade 1 lock. Of course, Yale can help us with grade 1 cylindrical locks, but this would be for that door that would be used very infrequently, maybe a storage closet or access to, well, it wouldn't be a storage closet as a passage, but some very low use, non-public application would probably be appropriate for a grade 2 cylindrical like this. They're field reversible, they're completely non-handed regardless, and other product options offer flexibility in many commercial applications. They're economical, they're secure, they're grade 2, reversible, a wide range of functions, 4 trims and 8 finishes, and they're ADA compliant for not only the requirement of compatibility with ADA regulations, but they happen to function more ergonomically, I suppose. So you can do a 2 3/4, which is standard, or 2 3/8. This out of the box is adjustable from 1 3/8 to 1 3/4. Thicker than that, this lock's really not going to work. I'm sure it'll go to 1 7/8, something like that, but if you have a 2 inch or 2 1/4 door, this is the wrong lock. Again, non-handed and field reversible, 1/2 inch throw, 4 7/8 strike with 1 1/4 lip length. Other options, again grade 2, listed for 3 hour. This is windstorm rated with a 3-year warranty. Back to the windstorm rating, you're going to want to make sure that the door you're putting in the entire assembly has to be windstorm rated. So if you're doing a project where you're doing windstorm from Yale's sister company Seco, and you need to outfit it with hardware, this is possible as an option because it is certified. Now, what Yale does across their catalog is a pretty good job, and I'll just be blunt, not the best job of all manufacturers, but a really good job in terms of showing you how to order it. Every person who works in the hardware industry as a distributor like myself, or every cog in the wheel, so to speak, this is where we all meet to go over exactly how to put the lock into the language that the manufacturer needs to see it in, so that we can expect the smallest amount of mistakes. So when you give it to them in this fashion, you're going to see that there are now very little mistakes. And indeed, the part number that I've provided in this title of the video is exactly this function. And just going over this quickly, we have our 3 levers and our 1 knob, our functions, the hand. Even though this is non-handed, it's still best practice to specify that. Your latch and your strike options, which we'll get to, your cylinder type, your cylinder requirements, if applicable, your door range, any keying that's necessary, and then your finishes. 605 bright brass, 606 satin brass, 612 satin bronze. 613E is a dark bronze equivalent. That means it's a powder-coated dark brown color to emulate oil rub bronze. 625 is bright chrome, 626 satin chrome, 629 polished stainless, and 630 brushed stainless. So that's why I'm thinking that these are zinc levers with stainless roses. I don't think they'll tell us what the makeup is of the lever, but if they do, we'll know. And that's the structure right there. Swatches showing the finishes. Page showing all of our trim designs. AU, Augusta, by far the most common lever. Monroe and Pebble Beach, they're all common, but Augusta is just the default by far. Okay, bit more graceful return here, as is the Pebble Beach. They can do the Carolina knob, which is just a typical ball knob that you're going to see. You sure don't sell a lot of knobs in comparison to, of course, levers today, but once upon a time, you didn't sell any levers. But this ball knob is very typical and common. I would encourage the use of a knob every chance or every time that you can. It would certainly be less expensive than a lever, and it's a handsome sort of knob. It is easy to use. Is going to, in my opinion, will be a longer lasting product because the amount of leverage that you can apply to this lever on the spring, you're not able to do that as much with a knob. So stick with the knob if you can, but it's unusual that you'll be able to. Now the functions are here. So the 01 is a passage or closet latch, just a immediate ingress or egress from either side of the door at all times. And the operational description is here. That happens to be an F75. If you are looking for an F75 function, if you have an ANSI part number or an ANSI function number that you've been given, you can look at any manufacturer's catalog and look up F75. That's going to come back to being a cylindrical function. So if you're given an option of manufacturers, but the architect is telling you, I need F75, you automatically know what function that is. And through it, because this is a grade 2 lever, a grade 2 cylindrical, there are not that many functions. If it was a mortise lock, which of course would be grade 1, would be far more options. A grade 1 cylindrical will certainly have more functions than a grade 2 as well. Privacy. An entry lock, that is going to be a push button. So we would call it really, might be better to call it an office function where that's just a push button. The 07 is also an entry lock, but that's a push-turn button where it will stay locked. It will operate as a storeroom out here and a passage over here unless you unless you turn that button so as to unsecure or remove the rigid feature of the exterior lever. It can then operate as an entrance, as an office function, or it can operate as a passage. So sometimes you'll hear it called a triple function, and it is. It's what it is. Because either lever operates latch bolt, except when outside lever is locked from the inside. Pushing the turn button on the inside locks the outside lever. Okay? So you go to this lock, the button is not depressed, it is out. Either lever is always free. You go in the room, the door closes behind you, all you do is you push that button, now the outside is rigid, until you rotate this inside lever to exit. Then it goes back to being a passage function. However, you can keep it retained in the locked position if you push and then rotate it 90 degrees. Now it'll act like a storeroom. So passage, office, storeroom, triple function. This is the same thing except it's a push button only, so it only does 2 functions. Here's a storeroom, always locked on the outside, no button on the inside, always immediate egress. The classroom is a dual function lock. It can act as a storeroom, it can act as a storeroom or a passage, and that functionality is not controlled by a push button. It's controlled by the key from the outside. When you insert it and rotate it, you can set it always locked or set it always unlocked. Single dummy, forgive me, this is the single dummy, and this is a one-sided passage only with a blank plate on the inside. There'll be different functions for the, there may be a different ANSI numbers for knob trim. I can't think of an exact example of what to give you, but nonetheless, duplication of what we've just discussed. Now, cylinders, if you're looking at cylinders for this project, if you're doing a keyed function, be mindful that you would have a different, really a different tailpiece if you're doing a knob or a lever. Tailpieces are always horizontal, regardless of knob or lever, except that in a lever, you take that cylinder and you rotate it 90 degrees. It's now laying on its side, rendering this horizontal. That's why it's got that twist to it. These locks will come standard with the Yale Para, or the E1R keyway. Para stands for paracentric. It's the standard Yale keyway. .019 specification. That means it's a two-step system, that the increment between a 3-cut and a 4-cut is .019. That's a topic well outside of this video. Will come with 2 nickel-silver keys. Nickel-silver is important because that's the key blank that you want. A very durable construction, a very durable material to use when you have a keyed function. Certainly more durable than brass. Other keyways can be done. But in terms of other keyways, you are somewhat limited in the sense that you cannot do Yale's full-size removable core. You can do small format, the best family of keyways, or some of them, but you can't do a Yale removable core. So in terms of interchangeable or removable core, you can only do small format, which is best, Falcon, and Arrow, and every other clone of the best platform that's ever existed. Okay. Nice to know that you can do small format interchangeable core. Now your latch bolt options. 2 3/4. You can do a 2 3/8 as a radius corner or a square corner. That's nice to know. Gives you all the details. Because we're doing a passage, we'll be down in this plain latch bolt or non-deadlocking. Keyed functions will have a deadlocking feature to it right here. Okay. P for plain, D for deadlocking. Gives you the width of the material as well. Also gives you the throw, half-inch throw. That is so important to know when you're dealing with fire-rated doors. You might have an application that requires a 3/4 inch latch throw on a pair of doors. This lock cannot be used in that regard, although Yale can, of course, solve that problem for you. Options on strike plates. T-strike, 4 7/8 anti-strike, full lip strike with square and radius corners, and then a dust box. I should have actually, okay, I did not. I did not specify a dust box in my part number because this is going onto a hollow metal drywall frame, which has an integrated, forgive me, it's going onto a masonry frame grouted in a block wall that has an integrated mortar guard, which is why I did not specify the strike box for this. And then continuing through here, we're done with the product brochure. Very handy. Let's now move on to the template. Okay, as we move through this video, we're going to touch on the template now. And the template is a 2-page affair where we are seeing clearly a template for a steel door or a hollow metal door, and then a template for a wood door. They're different templates because what you need to end up drilling in each is definitely different in the sense of how you approach it. So they're, one technical drawing would not be representative of the proper way to prepare a door or to have a door prepared to receive this lock. So you follow one versus the other, and you do the same preparation at the end of the day, but it's just helpful to see exactly what you're dealing with. So your hollow metal door is probably already prepped. If you're going to do anything, you're going to do a preparation for the through holes at 12 and 6. Those are 5/16 holes at this particular center-to-center dimension. Okay. So 1 5/16 from here to here, here to here, 2 5/8 overall. The back set, of course, they're not telling you because you can do different back sets, and that is listed over here in terms of what back set. Now, I'd mentioned earlier that the conversation of back sets is more, there's more to it than just edge of door to the center of the hole. It's really the center of the thickness of the edge of the door from this point here to the edge of the door. It's not from here to here or here to here. And while on a square edge door that would certainly work, it would not work from here or here because of that bevel, which is 3 degree, and the definition is 1/8 in 2. So for every 2 inches in door thickness, that's going to give you 1/8 of an inch difference. So while our door will be marginally less than 1/8 of an inch, you can see how measuring it from what we would call the high side versus the low side would put one hole one hole is going to be over here, one hole is going to be over here, where the true hole is right in the center of both of them. Okay. Also, the preparation to do in the edge of the door as well. 2 1/8 inch hole, you know, typical material. The thing that you do need to do is make these little preparations. Doing it in a wood door is atypical because these prongs that need to be accommodated in the lock will seat themselves into the face of the door, or that's the theory. I find that they really don't. And I can't tighten the lock tight enough to get them to fully gouge into the face of the door. So I do a little relief there myself. Not any bigger than necessary, but you'll tighten that lock down and darn it, it just doesn't sit tight to the face of the door. It's because of not accommodating those small little notches or semicircles that you'll find at 3 and 9 o'clock. Okay. A hollow metal door is going to have a preparation that will look like this, squared or more typically rounded is what is going to happen there. Okay. I won't talk anything else about this. If you want to discuss how to prep the door at length, feel free to reach out. The next document, of course, is the installation instructions. And we'll go over the paperwork, and then we'll switch over to the product itself and kind of go over it. Okay, so an assembly of the lock, an exploded parts diagram. You definitely want to make sure that everything is here before you start, you know, loading up the truck and the tools and going to the job and get ready to put 30 of these in. You need to be sure you have a latch and a strike. You need to be sure that the lock is complete and that you have your fastener packages that will include the screws for the strike, the screws for the latch, at least as importantly, the screws to go through the door here, okay, and or to go to the through bolts through the outside rose assembly. So you're going to want to do a reality check. And down over here, they show how those through bolts will get modified in the exterior outside rose assembly. So just, you want to double check. Everything's there. Things are never missing from these locks, but it would be, best practice would tell us to check the contents of the box. This lock probably has 10,000 miles on it by the time it arrives to you, so you want to check the contents. Door preparation, we're not going to really touch on, except, you know, let's back up to the template, actually. And this lock has what is called a floating faceplate, where the faceplate underneath the latch bolt, the faceplate of the latch bolt can accommodate beveled or square-edged doors, so no need to be concerned about that. It will, when you make that preparation 2 1/4 by 1 1/8 and 5/32 deep, that faceplate will pivot ever so slightly. That sleeve you're going to definitely want in there for if you've drilled a 1-inch hole. You can get away with a 7/8 hole here, and you're permitted to drill that, but your typical is going to have a 1-inch hole. And if you find that that doesn't fit, you know, this with the sleeve on, pull the sleeve off and put it in. Door prep work here. And this really shows how to pull the lock apart as I had kind of demonstrated initially. That spacer you're going to pull off, then everything will come off and you'll use that tool that's included. Now, what happens first when you install this material is the latch bolt goes in first, and you're going to want to always and absolutely pre-drill the holes for the latch bolt because you don't want to split the style. That's an 832, well, it's a number 8 screw. It'll probably be a wood and machine combination screw. Be sure to pre-drill those, especially if, and most absolutely, if it's a fire door. I've seen lots of split styles here. Customers do not like that. There's no way to correct it. There's no way to fix it. So be sure to pre-drill it. The disassembly of the lock, I had demonstrated push pin in, lever off, spacer off. You won't need the tool when it comes out of the box. It won't be seated, but nonetheless, you might need it in the future. Now, the first thing that happens is your latch bolt gets applied to the edge of the door, always the first thing. Then you're going to bring your outside chassis, all of this, from the side of the door where it belongs. All of this. None of this will go in just yet, only this portion. And what they're showing on the top of page 2 is to make sure that the latch bolt engages in the retracting hub properly. That's pixelated, but you want to make sure that that's engaged properly. There's a correct way to do it, and then there's every other way to do it. I find it's easiest when you depress the latch slightly while you're sliding the chassis in through here. Depress that slightly, very slightly, in fact, not too much, and that should slide right in. At that point, you'll have your latch in, your chassis through the door. Then you're going to bring your mounting plate, and then your inside rose assembly. Okay, and at this point, you're going to, depending on your installation, you're either going to do through bolts, or you're going to bolt this plate with this hole here and here, right to these two tapped holes here and here. You will then secure possibly the rose to the plate. You might be doing the through bolt option as well, which we're going to demonstrate. Then at that point, your inside rose will go on, then your inside trim will go on. Now, adjustment for door thickness. When this arrives to you, it's going to be meant for an 1 3/4 door. So if you don't need to do anything about, if you have an 1 3/4 door, don't change anything, because it's going to be made for that. We'll demonstrate how to change the door thickness in a moment. And finally, your strike plate, which is probably already attached. If you had a keyed function, you'd probably want to look at this section, especially if you had to service the cylinder or rekey it, etc. Basically inserting the key, rotating it clockwise 90 degrees, using that tool with the push pin and pulling the whole assembly off is what will allow you to get that off the door. Putting it back on is pretty much the same process in reverse. So let's leave this up. Let's switch back to the screen view now and go through it step by step. Now, to demonstrate the assembly, I would always recommend through bolts in all instances when it comes to lever locks. And the reason is because, especially when you see these grade 2 cylindrical locks used in applications that they shouldn't be used in, the convenience store, the fast food, restroom, awful to use those. They're gas stations that get hundreds of uses a day. What happens is, I'm going to pull this off because it'll be a little easier to demonstrate, is when the latch, okay, without the through bolt, as you're turning the lever, you're putting that sort of force on it. Well, that latch bolt, that stresses the joint between the retracting hub and the latch itself, and eventually you're going to bend that to the point where it's not straight anymore. The lock's not going to work right. The lever won't return. The latch bolt's not going to return to a fully projected condition either. And if you have a fire door, that's a drop-dead violation of fire code. You've got to have proper engagement of the latch. The label on your fire door is going to say min latch throw, 1/2 inch. Well, the code will also say, because it will refer to the NFPA 80 standard, that you are only permitted a maximum gap between the edge of the door and the frame, which on a wood door would be 1/8 of an inch. Hollow metal door, it's 1/8 of an inch plus 0, so 1/8 is the max. And with hollow metal doors, I think it's, don't quote me, I've forgotten it more than I've learned it, I think. It's 1/8 of an inch plus or minus a 1/16. Wood doors have a tendency, actually, believe it or not, to shrink in a fire. So that maximum 1/8 of an inch is crucial, because they're saying it's 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch minimum latch throw. So if that door were to already be, too small in the opening, and the door shrinks, then you don't have proper engagement of the latch into the strike. So that's the problem there. And if you don't use through bolts on lever locks grade 2 or grade 3, it exacerbates the problem, is the bottom line. Now, knobs don't have options for through bolts because you really can't twist that enough to really make it a problem, but that lever is, I'm not sure of the compound forces that can be applied out here, but it's a lot. It's enough just to get the spring to return it horizontally. And in fact, in the very early days of ADA compliance, the early 1990s, levers were just awful. I'm sure every manufacturer had trouble with lever return springs. Yale has made countless lever return springs, not countless, 3 or 4 or 5, and have redesigned the chassis of their 5400 series. Schlage locks very early, Falcon locks very early. Those levers just didn't bring those lever springs just didn't bring it back up. So get the door to help you with as much of the work as possible by doing the through bolt preparation. Okay, now let's take a look. Assembly. Okay, so latch is in the door. You've slid this over the latch. The next thing to do is to bring that mounting plate. Oh no, that's not the next thing to do. I've just been, exhorting you to use the through bolts. If you're going to use the through bolts, that outside has to come off. That comes off. The rose assembly will come off. You've got to get the rose plate itself off. That's just a turn of it, and you'll be able to pull it off. Abracadabra. Okay. Okay, so what you'll end up doing is... Actually, you may not need to take these off. Let's take a closer look. And yes, with this model, you'll have to take the outside off. So we've got our two through bolts here, the female half of them. They're going to go right here and here, okay? And you're just going to place that in there like that, and you'll do one down here. Then you're going to bring all of that to this plate. That's going to keep everything, that's going to keep the bolt captive because this plate is preventing it from coming out. Okay, so that's what you'll need to do. And in fact, since we're already here, I will just install them for the client. And they can disassemble it if they elect not to use it, which I would doubt that they will, although I've seen it. You probably have as well. Oh, got that backwards. Okay. All right, so everything is captive there. The through bolts won't be able to come out. We're going to put our rose on. It doesn't turn, it just snaps, it just pressure fits straight. We'll put our exterior lever on. Okay. Everything there is now captive. Assembled, put together, your bolts are there. Okay. Oh, you know what? And by the way, if we were going to adjust the thickness, that plate is threaded. You would just run that plate clockwise to draw it down. I won't demonstrate it, but it's just that simple. To adjust the thickness, you'll just rotate that plate that's right there. Okay, that one. If the through bolts weren't in there, they would it would definitely turn for us. Okay, so now at this point, what do we have? Well, we have the next thing. Once this is installed in the door, you've got this plate. Well, this plate's going to be able to do a lot of things. First of all, you're going to run your screw. Yeah, certainly. So you'll be able to take So, depending on what you're going to do, the plate will certainly come next. If you have the through bolts here, you're going to use the through bolts. Okay? Regardless, you're going to use two of these screws. They're going to go right through into the chassis itself. One here and one here. And that will tighten that plate to it. Then, belt and suspenders approach. That inside rose assembly will then come, and through these holes, you're going to run your screw through there into the female side. Okay? If you're not doing through bolts, of these 6 screws, you'll only use 4 of the 6. You'll use these short little stubby screws, And that will then allow you to go through here and into that tapped hole that's there. So you're going to go to the chassis in all instances. You're either going to through bolt, or you're going to mount the inside rose assembly to the plate. So you're going to use, on the long screws, of which there are 4 of them, you're going to use 2 of them for sure. And then you're going to use either the other 2, or you're going to use the 2 short ones. So that's when I continue to refer to belt and suspenders approach, that's what I'm driving at. How they literally, you know, you're bolting it to the chassis, and then you're bolting the lock through the door itself. So it's pretty secure. At that point, there are no fasteners left except 2 for the strike, 2 for the latch, and then the other 2, this screw pack would be just typical if you were ordering it with a full lip or a T-strike, is where those 2 smaller screws would come into play. Okay? And there's nothing left on my desk at this point. This has literally gone together just that easily. Okay? 2 screws to the chassis, 2 screws, the inside rose assembly, 2 screws through to the through bolts, or 2 short stubby screws if these are not there. Your inside rose. Okay. Put that space around because it's going back to the client. Just push that down. Now it's all intact. The only thing we've done is add those through bolts. We didn't adjust the door thickness. There's no reason to do that. These are 1 3/4 thick. What are these? They are style and rail. They are 3070 oak style and rail doors. 1 3/4 solid is what they are. So let's take a look real quick at the screen view again so I can show you some supporting resources for Yale. Now back to the item we're looking at here. The link here to the manufacturer's page, that's going to allow you to review not only all of the Yale products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation here, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Prior versions of the catalog are certainly here as well. However, there are encyclopedic documents that are here, such as Master Keying Basics Overview. It was 30 years ago, or 29, that I discovered the Yale guide in terms of the Standard Key Coding System, SKCS. And they do a really great job at explaining level 1, level 2, level 3, and beyond, how to call out the definitions of the terms that are used in the industry to elegantly convey to someone else within the industry what you expect when it comes to how to tag or what to call keys and what to call lock sets. So Yale's document is really great. It's the first one that I really looked at and read. Cylinders and Keying Manual. That's going to talk obviously about their cylinders. There is a Yale Keyways hierarchy. Okay, this is by no means comprehensive. By no means. Yale has countless keyways, both, unrestricted, restricted, patented, protected, secret. There's no documentation of that stuff. A Yale Keymark exit device, mortise lock parts manual, prior versions of some of this stuff. A bicentric cylinder article by Lawrence Simon. Yale had a bicentric cylinder that I believe to be from about 1875. Don't quote me, I don't know when, but about then. And it's an interesting article written by someone who worked in the industry for his entire life and his family, and how the bicentric cylinder, which is literally 2 cylinders in a single housing, would give you certain abilities over the rights and privileges over that door, and do so in such a way where you are not creating unintended consequences. So a very fascinating piece of history in terms of Yale. Now, also in terms of history and Yale, we have catalogs that go back to 1880 to 1830 to 1937. Really interesting if you want to look back in time and see what was made. They're all great catalogs. 1884. I've used these documents when studying for locksmithing exams because it is literally a way to be able to look back in time and see what it is that you're dealing with. We won't, I'll pause this and we'll wait for this document to load. So we've got that document pulled up. It's 400 pages of pure manufacturing history. The pin tumbler cylinder was alive and well in 1880. However, at that time, so were lever locks. And when I say lever locks, I do not mean locks that have lever trim. I mean lever tumbler locks, which is the predecessor, in terms of the evolution of locks manufactured, the predecessor to the pin tumbler lock. It was, in fact, Linus Yale Jr. who brought into mainstream the pin tumbler cylinder that we all use on a daily basis in about 1850. And while he didn't invent the concept, he definitely took a 4,000-year-old Egyptian principle and brought it into the mainstream. And we have been riding that wave for 170 years to this point. But the lever tumbler lock, which is the predecessor in evolution to the pin tumbler lock, would have taken a bit key like this. Maybe you call it a skeleton key. Locksmiths understand what you mean by that, and it does have a particular specific meaning within the locksmithing industry, but for all intents and purposes, you can call it a skeleton key, because that's what, the general layman knows it as. But a very different type of construction on the inside of here. Now, if you were in a city like Chicago or New York, and maybe you grew up many decades ago, it's very likely that, the home or the apartment or whatever you lived in had bit-style key locks. I can think of, I know of a lot of, apartment buildings on the northwest side of Chicago that are full of these locks that are original. And if they're not original, they've been replaced by a copy of the original, a cheap import of the original. So if you were wanting to explore some history of the evolution of the lock, looking up, there we go, I was scrolling for a picture. That's what if you looked at a modern mortise lock, the only thing it's going to have in common will be the shape of it and the fact that it'll have a hub for your trim, but otherwise inherently different. This is the lever tumbler. This would be called a close-gated lever tumbler. And that bit key gets stuck in there, and when you rotate it, it will lift these levers to a particular height so that when you continue to turn, this here is called the fence. And when all of the lever tumblers are lifted to the proper height, the fence can pass through the gate. This open area here is called the gate, allowing the lock to... what's interesting is I believe that this drawing is wrong. This bolt should be in the retracted position when the stump is here, or the fence. It can be called the stump, but the fence is here. I would expect the stump to be over... Oh, no, forgive me. They've got it right. Forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, it's in the right position. When this goes in, this has to go over. Okay, so, and this would be considered, this is actually a sliding door lock, but the lever principle allows it to work in the same fashion. And what happens is, this bolt projects, and I don't know why they need the bolt, because maybe it could be used on a swinging door as well, but when this bolt is in the thrown position, it will prevent the trim from rotating, lifting this spring-biased lever arm to remove it from the strike. And the term standard is used in the Yale parlance to mean the old technology, the old stuff, the stuff they're trying to probably get you away from, lever tumbler technology. Okay, and you'll find this in different manufacturers' catalogs, like Russwin and Sargent, into the 20th century as well. But because Yale is responsible for bringing the pin tumbler into the modern technology, it is in their catalog a lot earlier than you'll see one in a P.F. Corbin catalog. Anyway, just interesting. Not to divert too much time, but very interesting to go back in time and look at that material. Okay, so now that we're done with our history lesson here of Yale, let's wrap up this video on camera. Certainly a decent quality lock from Yale. I wouldn't hesitate to use this lock, and in fact, I have personally used this construction of lock for decades. As I had said earlier, Yale does not use this exclusively, that sort of belt and suspender sort of construction. other manufacturers use it as well. One in particular that I'm thinking of. And that lock has always proven to be a very good quality, dependable lock. But don't use it on those restroom doors. Don't use it on college campuses. It's just not appropriate for that sort of work whatsoever. Light duty commercial, absolutely light duty commercial is where I would use this. Yale, exit devices, lock sets, door closers, etc. Good quality folks over there. Technical support is responsive, and to them we say thank you. If you have any questions on the Yale AU4601LN, all those other part numbers I had mentioned earlier, MPC234, MDC234, not MPC, MCP. Oh yeah, of course, it is a plain latch because it's a password set, 497, etc., etc. Any questions on this or any other Yale product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.